Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive engineer refuses to let a luxury HOA use his old family bridge, a quiet property dispute erupts into a legal and media firestorm. One man, one bridge, and a war against entitlement he never asked for. Justice isn't always quiet. And neither is Wade Morgan. When I was 12 years old, my grandfather let me help replace a warped plank on the old bridge behind our house. I remember how he handed me the hammer and said, "This bridge is part of the family, Wade. It's not just wood and nails. It's what gets us home." That line stuck with me my whole life. Now, 40 years later, I'm the one maintaining that same bridge. I know every creak, every knot in the grain. It may not look like much to outsiders, but that old bridge has carried generations of Morgans across the ravine, and it still does its job, at least when people don't try to break it. I live on 80 acres of woodland in Tennessee, hills, dense trees, and a ravine deep enough to swallow a small truck. My house sits tucked away past that ravine, and the only way in or out, unless you have a helicopter, is over that bridge. Built by my grandfather in the late 70s, it's a timber structure with reinforced beams and a hand-built charm you can't find in modern construction. But it wasn't made for the 21st century's obsession with oversized SUVs and delivery trucks. It's rated for small passenger vehicles, no more than 2 tons. And frankly, that's pushing it. I'm retired now. Used to work as a structural engineer for county infrastructure, but these days I spend most of my time on the land, fixing fences, cutting brush, inspecting that bridge every few weeks just to make sure no rot is creeping in. Peaceful life. Until the development started. About 3 years ago, the hills next to my property were cleared for a new luxury subdivision, Hilltop Manor. Fancy name for a bunch of identical houses built way too close together. They advertised exclusive community living and elevated access to nature, which I guess meant let's slap a bunch of stucco boxes next to someone else's trees and pretend it's wilderness. The subdivision came with its own HOA, of course, Hilltop Manor Property Association, and at the head of that HOA was a woman named Karen Price. Now, Karen was the sort of person who wore tailored yoga pants like a military uniform. Always marching somewhere, clipboard or tablet in hand, issuing orders like she ran a Fortune 500 company. I didn't have any interaction with her until a little over a year ago when she showed up at my gate, smiling that forced, over-white smile that said she was about to try something audacious and wanted you to like her while she did it. "Mr. Morgan," she said, extending her hand like a politician. "I'm Karen Price, president of the Hilltop Manor HOA. Lovely place you have here. So rustic." I shook her hand out of courtesy, but kept one eye on her SUV, which she'd parked a little too close to the bridge. "What can I do for you?" She launched into her pitch like she'd practiced it in the mirror. Apparently, their residents had discovered that using my bridge as a shortcut could shave off 4 miles from their commute to the main highway. Instead of looping around the county road like the developers intended, they could just cross my bridge, cut through my land, and pop out onto State Route 12. "We'd like to offer you a formal proposal," she said. $500 per year for a rite of passage agreement. Nothing official, just an understanding. Our folks get access through your bridge, and you get a bit of extra income. Win-win. I stared at her for a beat, trying to decide if she was joking. "Ma'am, that bridge is on my private property. It's rated for passenger cars under 2 tons, and it was never meant for frequent traffic. You put 20 cars a day over that thing, and it's going to fail within the year." Her smile didn't falter. "We'd be careful, of course, and we could even consider contributing to maintenance in the future." "No," I said plainly. "Not happening. It's not just about the weight. It's liability, privacy, wear and tear. I'm not interested." Karen wasn't used to hearing no. That much was obvious. Her smile tightened. "Mr. Morgan, we believe in community integration. This is about efficiency, about shared access, about—" I cut her off. "About you wanting to save yourself and your neighbors a few minutes at my expense. I'll say it again. The answer is no." She left that day with a polite nod and a strained goodbye, but I wasn't taking chances. The next day, I drafted a formal letter through my attorney, Mark Delaney. It stated in plain terms the bridge was private property rated for under 2 tons, not a public road, not for use by residents or contractors of Hilltop Manor. Any use without permission would be considered trespassing. Liability for damages would rest entirely with the violators. A copy was sent to Karen, certified mail, with return receipt requested. Another went to the county sheriff's office just to be safe. Mark called me after they signed for it. "Think that's the end of it?" he asked. I looked out the window toward the tree line where the bridge sat, quiet and still. "I'd like to think so," I said. I should have known better. It started small, a bit of gravel where there shouldn't be any. Faint tire marks on the bridge planks. I figured maybe a delivery driver had gotten turned around, saw my private drive, and decided to risk it. It wasn't unheard of, though it always ticked me off. That bridge isn't some open invitation. It's part of my home. Still, I let it go. Then it happened again, and again, and again. At first, it was maybe once or twice a week. A sedan here, a crossover there. Always during daylight, always casual, like they belonged. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the timing sure as hell lined up with Hilltop Manor getting fully occupied. More new families moving in, more shiny cars with out-of-state plates, more people looking for shortcuts like the world owed them one. I put up a sign, big, bold, and very clear. Private property, no trespassing. Bridge rated for vehicles under 2 tons only. Bolted it into a 4x4 post, buried 2 feet down. You'd have to be blind not to see it. It was gone within a week. Not knocked down, not fallen. Gone. Post, bolts, everything. Like someone came prepared, brought tools, and didn't want anyone knowing they'd been there. That got my blood pressure up. I built a second one, bigger, bright red lettering this time. 2 signs actually, one on either side of the bridge. I even added a line, "Violators will be reported to law enforcement." 2 days later, they were both missing. That's when I knew this wasn't some one-off thing. This was organized, intentional. Someone over in Hilltop Manor was encouraging their people to use my bridge. Maybe not openly, but sure as hell passively. And if I knew Karen Price, and I was starting to learn, I'd bet a week's worth of firewood she was behind it. I called Mark, my lawyer. They're using it regularly, and now they're removing my signs. He sighed on the other end. "You want me to draft a cease and desist?" "Already did that," I said. "Last year. What I need now is proof." So I installed a trail camera, not one of those obvious boxes you stick to a pole. This was a camo-painted, motion-activated lens tucked up in the trees about 10 feet off the ground. You'd never know it was there unless you knew where to look. The footage went to a hard drive in the house via a wireless repeater. I'd review it each night while sipping coffee, wondering just how entitled people could get. The answer? Very. Within 1 week, I counted over 70 vehicles crossing the bridge. 70 in 1 damn week. That included multiple lifted pickups, full-size SUVs, and even 1 landscaping truck, probably over the weight limit by a good margin. Some vehicles came by multiple times per day. I recognized faces. Some even waved at the camera without knowing it was there. That wasn't just trespassing. That was a parade. I pulled the footage, marked the license plates I could catch, and wrote up a report. Then I sent an official complaint to the Hilltop Manor HOA. Certified mail again, this time with photos attached. I highlighted the bridge's specs, repeated the load limit, and demanded an explanation. I also requested that they issue a written notice to all residents. Stop using my damn bridge. 2 days later, I got a reply. Email, not mail. From Karen. "Dear Mr. Morgan," she wrote, "Hilltop Manor Property Association cannot be held responsible for the voluntary driving behavior of individual residents. The road leading to your property has been in informal use for some time, and it is our understanding that local maps show it as accessible. We have no authority to enforce your restrictions." I read it twice, then laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Informal use? Local maps? That road is gravel, unmarked, gated at the front, and the bridge has been there since Disco was still alive. There was nothing public about any of it. But Karen was playing the classic HOA game. Pretend something has always been a certain way and hope nobody challenges it. So I challenged it. I wrote back, calm, professional, but firm. Your understanding is incorrect. The bridge and all land surrounding it are privately owned, maintained, and registered under my name. I have documented multiple instances of unauthorized use. Further violations will be considered trespassing, and I reserve the right to pursue legal remedies. Her reply? Silence. That same week, a new resident from Hilltop Manor had the audacity to slow roll past me while I was hauling brush near the road. He leaned out the window and said, "You know, you really ought to open that road up for everyone. Be neighborly." I wiped sweat off my forehead, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "You paying for repairs when that bridge collapses under your Tahoe?" He didn't answer, just smiled like I was being unreasonable, and drove off. So now I knew two things for sure. One, Karen wasn't just passively allowing this, she was encouraging it. And two, if I didn't stop this, that bridge was going to fail. And when it did, they were going to try to blame me. I started saving every damn file, photo, plate number, and timestamp. I wasn't going to be the old guy in the woods yelling at clouds. If they wanted war, I'd give them engineering, documentation, and legal hell. By late spring, the creaking had changed. The bridge always talked a little underweight. Timber does that. But now it groaned, strained like a man with a slipped disc. You could feel it in the boards when you drove across, just enough to raise hairs on the back of your neck. Something wasn't right. So I did what I used to do for a living. I inspected the damn thing properly. I grabbed my notepad, a flashlight, and my old measuring calipers, started at the support beams. One of the cross ties had a visible split that hadn't been there a few months ago. The southern truss had sagged by about 1.25 inches since my last full check. Bolts were loosening under stress. Pressure points near the center span had spider webbing in the grain that suggested compression strain. In simple terms, the bridge was tired, and not from my truck. I ran calculations that night, sitting at my dining room table with 3 mugs of black coffee and a headache building behind my eyes. Factoring in the repeated loads, the estimated weights from the camera footage, and the rate of decay from recent weather, I gave it maybe another 3 to 5 months before we'd be looking at catastrophic failure. Maybe sooner if someone crossed it with something truly stupid, like a trailer or construction equipment. I wasn't guessing, I was diagnosing. And what I saw scared the hell out of me. So I wrote another letter. Actually, I wrote 3. One went to Karen Price, president of Hilltop Manor HOA. Another went to the county sheriff's office. The third went to my attorney. All by certified mail, all with receipts. I laid it out clearly. The bridge's load capacity was now reduced to 1.5 tons due to structural fatigue from unauthorized traffic. I included photographs of the damage, a technical diagram, and a signed engineer's note. Mine. I specifically warned any further use by heavy vehicles would risk collapse. I also stated in bold type that I accept no liability for injuries or damages resulting from trespassers ignoring these warnings. That should have been the end of it. That should have scared anyone with a functioning frontal lobe. Instead, I got a response from Karen, a printed letter with a Hilltop Manor logo in pale gold foil and the kind of font that tried too hard to look dignified. "Dear Mr. Morgan," it began, "your repeated correspondence has been noted. While we understand your concerns, the bridge continues to appear structurally sound from visual inspection. We urge you to avoid disseminating alarmist statements, which may unduly frighten residents. Please refrain from attempting to intimidate our community." Intimidate. That's what she thought I was doing, intimidating people. I read that line 3 times, each time feeling the anger tighten my jaw like a vice. Not once did she acknowledge the warnings. Not once did she mention the camera footage, the signs, the letters, the obvious trespassing. Just that the bridge looked fine. Well, a grenade looks fine right before the pin gets pulled. I made sure to forward a copy of her letter to Mark, who immediately added it to the growing file. He called me that evening and said, "Wade, at this point, you've done everything a reasonable person can do. If something goes wrong after this, it's on them. But just in case, keep documenting." I added extra bracing to the support post, not because it would save the bridge, but because it would slow the collapse just enough to maybe keep someone from dying. I posted 2 new signs, reinforced with rebar and concrete footers this time. One of them lasted 3 days. The other was run over by what looked like a lifted F-250 based on the tread marks. The camera was still rolling. I had footage of the truck, the plates, the slow crawl over the bridge with zero hesitation. They weren't just ignoring me. They were daring me to stop them. And you know what? Part of me almost wanted it to break, just to prove a point. Just to wipe that smug, performative righteousness off Karen's face. But that's not who I am. I didn't want blood. I didn't want lawsuits. I just wanted to be left the hell alone, to have my land respected, to keep that damn bridge standing. It was like shouting into a void. No matter how loud I warned, no one on the other side seemed to care. But I knew something they didn't. I knew what came next. It happened on a Tuesday morning, about 2 weeks after the last warning letter. I remember the exact time, 8:32. I was out by the shed, sorting through a box of rusted nails and mismatched brackets, when I heard the rumble. Not the usual deep thump of a pickup or the lighter growl of a commuter sedan. No, this was different. Heavy, slow, like something you feel in your chest before you hear it in your ears. I stepped out, looked toward the ravine, and saw an excavator. A goddamn full-sized, tracked excavator rolling down the gravel path from Hilltop Manor, heading straight for my bridge. At first, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. 8 tons of steel and hydraulics crawling along like it owned the place. There was a man inside the cab, wearing a reflective vest, bouncing casually in his seat, like this was the most normal thing in the world. I shouted, loud, waved my arms like a lunatic. Stop, back up. Either he didn't hear me, or he didn't care. He kept going. The treads clanked onto the first planks, and the bridge groaned like it was trying to scream. I took off running. Too late. The sound of splintering wood tore through the air like a shotgun blast. Then came the crash, deep, sharp, and final. I reached the edge just in time to see the bridge snap in half at the midpoint. The beams folded like wet matchsticks. The excavator's front end dipped, then the whole thing tipped forward and disappeared into the ravine with a deafening metallic howl. There was a moment of silence, then the screech of twisting steel and a cloud of dust. I scrambled down the slope as fast as I could without breaking my own damn leg. The cab had landed tilted, half crushed, wedged against a boulder. The driver was conscious, bleeding from the temple, his leg trapped. He looked at me like a man who'd just seen God shake his head. I called 911 and stayed with him until paramedics arrived. He kept saying one thing over and over. She told me it was safe. She told me it was fine. The sheriff showed up not long after the ambulance. I gave my statement, handed over copies of the letters, the camera footage, everything. He didn't say much, just nodded grimly and took notes. Said they'd get statements from the HOA. By noon, the place was swarming with responders, fire department, tow trucks, even someone from the county safety board. They had to shut down part of the ravine road to extract the excavator. A news van from a local channel showed up by 2 in the afternoon. I saw Karen standing near their camera crew, dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, like she was at a fundraiser, not a crash site. She spoke into the mic with practiced calm. This is an unfortunate incident. We were not aware of any immediate danger associated with the bridge. It appears the structure failed unexpectedly. Hilltop Manor HOA is cooperating fully with the investigation. I didn't say a word, just stood across the clearing, arms crossed, watching her lie with all the grace of a pageant queen. No shame, no acknowledgement, not even a glance in my direction. When the crew asked if I had a statement, I handed them a printed copy of my original warning letter, dated, signed, certified, and ignored. Later that evening, I walked back down to the ravine alone. What used to be a bridge was now a pile of splinters, twisted rebar, and snapped beams. The rails were gone. The center span had completely collapsed. The excavator had been dragged out already, but the ground still bore deep scars where it hit. I knelt beside one of the main support timbers. Oak, thick as my thigh, split clean through like a snapped femur. I ran my hand over the brake. It wasn't rot, it wasn't time, it was force. Too much, too fast, too often. That bridge had stood for over 4 decades, my grandfather's work, my responsibility, and now it was gone. Not because of storms or age or time, but because someone couldn't be bothered to take no for an answer. I went back to the house, pulled out my files, and laid them all on the table. I knew what was coming next. I expected a fight. I'd been preparing for it since the first tire mark showed up on that bridge. What I didn't expect, what no sane man could expect, was the level of sheer jaw-dropping audacity that landed in my mailbox the following week. It came in a heavy white envelope, delivered by a courier who didn't even make eye contact as he handed it over. "For Mr. Wade Morgan," he muttered, already walking back to his truck. Inside, a thick stack of legal documents printed on heavy stock paper with the kind of letterhead that screamed money. At the top of the first page, in bold, notice of civil action. And right below that, plaintiff, Hilltop Manor Property Association, defendant, Wade L. Morgan. I read through it twice, sitting at the kitchen table in my work boots, with a mug of coffee going cold in my hand. Then I burst out laughing. Not a joyful laugh, not even bitter, just the kind of half-mad chuckle you let out when reality finally snaps the last wire in your brain. They were suing me for $650,000. I read the claims aloud just to hear how ridiculous they sounded. $180,000 for damages to contractor equipment, $200,000 in medical liability for injuries sustained by operator, $150,000 for delays to critical community infrastructure, and, this was the cherry, $120,000 for emotional damages to residents who have lost access to a trusted and efficient commute path. I had to put the letter down before I crushed it in my fists. According to the suit, the bridge had been functionally adopted into community use, and I had knowingly allowed continued access despite awareness of degradation. It accused me of maintaining an attractive but hazardous structure and failing to warn of impending collapse. I didn't know whether to scream or puke. They were painting me as the villain, me, the guy who'd sent 3 separate certified warnings, who'd posted signs, who'd installed cameras, who'd told them in plain English that the bridge wasn't safe. I called Mark. He showed up 40 minutes later with a six-pack and a fire in his eyes. "This is a stunt," he said, flipping through the documents like they were filthy rags. "A desperate one, but clever. They're hoping to shift blame fast and loud. If they control the narrative, it doesn't matter that they're wrong, only that they're first." "I'm not paying a dime," I said. "Good," he replied, "because you're not going to." We spent the rest of the afternoon cataloging everything. All the letters, all the video files, time-stamped logs, maintenance records going back 10 years. I even dug out the inspection notes from my last structural review, complete with annotated photographs of sagging beams and cracking joists. Every piece of evidence that said, "I told them." They didn't listen. Then Mark did something I wasn't expecting. He brought in a private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Terry with a voice like sandpaper and a knack for digging into HOA board meetings. Within a day, she found something golden, an email leaked by a former board member who'd grown tired of Karen's antics. Dated 2 weeks before the collapse. In it, Karen writes to the Hilltop board, "Mr. Morgan continues to exaggerate the bridge issue. We've been using it for months with no incident. The contractor has been advised to use that route to save time and money. I've told him it's structurally sound." Mark read the line twice, then leaned back in his chair and smiled like a wolf seeing a wounded deer. She's toast. That's when we decided to counterattack. We filed a counterclaim in response, $380,000 in damages, $85,000 for the complete destruction of a historically significant private structure, $200,000 for unauthorized usage of private property over the past year, $95,000 for emotional distress and loss of peaceful enjoyment of land. We made it personal, too. We named Karen Price directly in the filing, cited her email, her public dismissal of my warnings, her on-camera statement that the bridge appeared fine. Every time she opened her mouth, she dug the hole deeper, and I plan to hand her a damn shovel. A week later, Karen sent her own statement to local news. It was pure spin. This unfortunate incident underscores the need for clearer infrastructure standards in our community. We believe Mr. Morgan did not fulfill his responsibilities as a landowner. However, we remain hopeful for a fair resolution and continued neighborly relations. I nearly choked on my coffee again. Neighborly? After filing a $750,000 lawsuit against me. But then something happened that shifted the whole game. A guy named Jason Reed called me, said he was an independent journalist running a regional column on property rights and HOA abuses. He'd seen the news coverage, the photos, the legal filings, and he wanted to talk. At first, I said no. I'd had enough attention for 1 decade. But then he sent me a list of his past articles, one about an HOA in Georgia that illegally bulldozed a homeowner's garden, another about a Colorado retiree fined for planting native shrubs. Jason wasn't chasing headlines. He was chasing truth. We met at the bridge, or what was left of it. He walked the site like a crime scene investigator, quiet and precise. Took photos, asked sharp questions, wanted to see the signs, the camera, the paperwork. I gave him everything, no embellishments. Just the raw facts. He nodded as I finished. "You're not the first person this has happened to," he said, "but you might be the last if we do this right." That night, his article went live. The headline was simple: "The bridge that Karen broke. Inside one man's fight against HOA overreach." It blew up. Local news picked it up. State outlets reposted. HOA forums lit up with debates and outrage. People started reaching out to me from other counties, sharing their own Karen horror stories. One woman even sent me a fruit basket and a card that read, "Keep swinging. Wade. We're with you." Karen tried to do damage control, called a closed-door emergency HOA meeting, released a formal statement denouncing sensationalized media coverage, but the damage was done. The public was paying attention now, and she couldn't spin her way out of that. If Jason's first article cracked the dam, his follow-up blew the whole thing wide open. By the end of the week, the man had uncovered a treasure trove of dirt. Turns out, Hilltop Manor wasn't Karen's first HOA gig. She'd served on 2 boards in 2 other states before landing here, and both tenures ended in lawsuits, one for financial mismanagement, one for abuse of authority. Jason tracked down court records, public filings, even a couple of angry ex-residents willing to speak on the record. The pattern was clear. Karen liked control, hated limits, and treated HOA bylaws like her own personal suggestion box. When his second expose dropped, Karen Price, the reign of the HOA queen. It didn't just light up Facebook feeds and Reddit threads. Local TV stations started showing up outside Hilltop Manor's gates. Residents who used to ignore me at the grocery store suddenly wanted to shake my hand. And Karen started sweating. The first big crack came from the contractor. His name was James Booth, owner of a small construction outfit from 2 towns over. Up until then, he'd kept quiet, probably waiting to see which way the wind would blow. But once Jason's article quoted Karen's email authorizing the use of my bridge, Booth flipped faster than a greased pancake. He gave an official statement to the media and the court. I specifically asked if the bridge was safe for the excavator. Ms. Price told me, quote, "Don't worry, we've been using it for a year. It's just old, not dangerous." I relied on that. If I'd known about the owner's warnings or the weight limits, I would have taken the long way around. Turns out, the long way wasn't just 6 miles farther. It was mostly paved, safer for equipment, and the only reason he didn't take it was because Karen wanted to cut down on project costs and get the damn swing set installed by the weekend. Then came the excavator driver. His name was Luis Medina. Guy had a busted femur, 3 fractured ribs, a concussion, and permanent nerve damage in his ankle. He gave a deposition under oath that made my jaw drop. She waved me through, literally waved her hand and said, "You're good, honey." That bridge is solid as a rock. I asked her twice if it was rated for the load. She rolled her eyes and said, "We use it all the time, don't be dramatic." He'd been out of work for over a month. Medical bills were piling up. And now, with the lawsuit against me falling apart, Luis filed his own, not against me, but against the HOA and Karen personally. $500,000 in damages for negligence, endangerment, and reckless disregard for safety. Mark smiled when he read the complaint. "Welcome to the Karen collapse. You know what they say, rats don't just abandon sinking ships. Sometimes they gnaw each other's throats on the way down." I didn't think it could get more absurd. Then the insurance company chimed in. Karen had filed a claim with Hilltop Manor's liability policy to cover the damages, the broken excavator, the stalled construction, even her legal defense. But after reviewing the documents, footage, and my beautifully organized folder of "I told you so," they issued a formal denial. In their words, "This incident stems from gross negligence and willful disregard for repeated safety warnings. As such, coverage is void under Section 8 of the policy." Boom. No payout, no legal defense fund, just Karen and her board staring down the barrel of 3 lawsuits, a wrecked bridge, and no financial cushion. Then came the residents. At first, they rallied around her. Most folks just wanted their shortcut back, and Karen had sold them the idea that I was some cranky hermit trying to wall off the wilderness. But now, with the media circling, lawsuits stacking, and their HOA dues possibly being used to pay for her screw-ups, they turned. Someone leaked audio from an emergency HOA board meeting, Karen snapping at board members, accusing them of betrayal, threatening to fine people who questioned her judgment. It played on the local news the next evening, sandwiched between weather and a high school football story. Suddenly, Hilltop Manor wasn't just a subdivision, it was a spectacle. By the end of the month, 2 board members resigned. Residents petitioned to hold a vote of no confidence. A dozen homeowners filed a class action suit against the HOA for misuse of funds and damaging the reputation of the community. And through all of it, I stayed quiet. I didn't go on camera, didn't give interviews. When Jason called to ask for a comment on the fallout, I said, "Let the documents speak." But I watched. Oh, I watched. I watched as the woman who stood in my driveway, grinning like a sales rep at a timeshare convention, was now hounded by reporters outside her door. I watched as contractors refused to work with Hilltop Manor unless they paid in full, up front. I watched as Karen Price became a meme in online HOA forums, her face photoshopped onto a crumbling bridge with the caption, "It looked fine to me." And still, through it all, she didn't back down. Even after her own legal team begged her to settle, even after residents demanded her resignation, even after the sheriff's office opened an investigation into possible criminal negligence after reviewing Luis's medical report, she held on like a possum to a power line, shaking and screaming, but refusing to let go. And that, more than anything, told me she was going down. Because even the most stubborn tyrants forget one thing. Eventually, everyone else gets tired of holding the rope. The courthouse in Madison County isn't a glamorous place. Faded linoleum floors, vending machines from another century, and a parking lot full of folks who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. But to me, it felt like a battlefield. Not the start of a war. No, that already happened. This was the final round. The last bell. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she was trying to cosplay a senator. Charcoal gray suit, stiff posture, lips pressed tight enough to seal Tupperware. Her lawyer was younger than I expected. Slick haircut, big words, that over-rehearsed courtroom charm that works better on juries than judges. Mark leaned over and whispered, "Watch this guy try to sell a Rolex in a pawn shop." I smirked. We weren't the only case on the docket that day, but the gallery was packed. Reporters, Hilltop Manor residents. Even Jason showed up, taking notes in the back like he was writing the final chapter of a book. A few people gave me nods of support. One old guy with a beard mouthed, "Get her," as I walked in. I didn't nod back. I just sat down, kept my mouth shut, and waited for the truth to do what truth does best, settle heavy on the guilty. The judge, a man named Reinhardt, looked like he'd seen it all and was unimpressed by most of it. He didn't smile, didn't joke, but when he opened his folder and started reading aloud, I realized something. He'd read every single one of my letters. He quoted them line by line, the certified notice from last year, the technical breakdown I'd sent about load capacity, the revised weight rating I'd calculated after inspecting the stress fractures, every warning I'd given, every red flag Karen had ignored. Mr. Morgan appears to have gone above and beyond what would be expected of a reasonable landowner, Judge Reinhardt said. The plaintiff, conversely, demonstrated a pattern of disregard, not only for property rights, but for explicit safety concerns communicated in writing with documentation. Karen's lawyer tried to shift blame. He called the bridge a hidden hazard, said I had a duty to maintain a structure adjacent to a growing community, claimed the HOA operated under the assumption of tacit permission because I hadn't physically blocked the road. That's when Mark stood up and calmly pulled out a thumb drive. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter video evidence," time-stamped footage of repeated trespassing over Mr. Morgan's bridge, including large vehicles despite clearly visible signs. We also have copies of those signs, replacement receipts, and photographs of where they were removed or destroyed. Then he played the footage. Silent clips of cars crossing, trucks, SUVs, the same ones, over and over. And then finally, the footage from the day of the collapse. The excavator pulling onto the bridge, the timbers bowing, the fatal break. The courtroom was dead silent. Karen's lawyer tried again, claimed no one could have reasonably predicted the collapse. That's when Mark delivered the knockout. He handed over a printed copy of Karen's internal HOA email, the one where she'd written, "We've been using it for months. It's just old, not dangerous. The contractor can take the shortcut." Judge Reinhardt looked at that email for a long time, then back at Karen. "Miss Price, did you or did you not override the contractor's safety concerns?" Her voice cracked on the first try. I believed it was safe, but you were explicitly told otherwise. I thought Mr. Morgan was exaggerating." He set the paper down slowly. "Ms. Price, your belief does not supersede written notice, expert testimony, and common sense." Then came the ruling. The lawsuit against me? Dismissed, with prejudice. Judge Reinhardt didn't just toss it, he crushed it. In his summary, he said the HOA had acted recklessly, negligently, and with contempt for both private property and public safety. Then came the counterclaim ruling. The judge didn't blink. $380,000, $85,000 for the destroyed bridge, $200,000 for unlawful usage, $95,000 for stress, surveillance costs, and the sheer hell they'd put me through. And then the real hammer, Karen Price, held personally liable for a portion of the damages due to her direct actions and deliberate misrepresentations. The courtroom rippled. Reporters scribbled like mad. Karen didn't look shocked. She looked empty, like something had been scooped out of her from the inside. But the circus wasn't over. Next came Luis's lawsuit. His attorney brought photos, x-rays, medical charts, physical therapy schedules, played a snippet of a recorded conversation between Luis and Karen from the day of the accident. You could hear her voice clear as day. "Oh, stop being dramatic. Just drive the damn thing. That bridge is fine." Judge Reinhardt ruled in Luis's favor. $450,000 for medical costs, lost income, and emotional trauma. Then came James Booth, the contractor. Turns out, Karen had never even signed the contract with his company. She'd promised payment after successful completion. No written agreement, no deposit, nothing. He won his claim, too. $210,000, lost equipment, wages, and a big chunk for breach of verbal contract. Karen didn't stay to hear the final numbers. She left the courtroom before they were done reading them aloud, trailed by 2 board members and the smell of a burning reputation. By the end of that week, her house was listed for sale. Rumor had it she was moving back to Florida, where her first HOA scandal had started. I hoped they'd greet her with torches. The residents of Hilltop Manor voted her out unanimously. Her name was removed from every official document. The HOA issued a formal apology and settled privately with several homeowners who'd threatened more suits. And Hilltop's new board. They reached out to me with a handwritten letter expressing their deepest regret and promising to respect the boundaries of all neighboring properties moving forward. I didn't write back. I had a bridge to rebuild. The ground was dry that morning. Good working weather, cool, no wind, with the smell of sawdust and concrete thick in the air. I stood at the edge of the ravine, hands on my hips, watching the final panel go in. Reinforced concrete slab, steel rebar mesh, load rated to 15 tons. The crew I hired didn't mess around. They'd built county roads, fire station access lanes, stuff that had to hold up to real pressure. Now they were building for me. It had taken 6 weeks to clear the debris, stabilize the slope, pour new foundations, and install the full-length, professionally engineered bridge. Not a single board in sight. No more creaking timber, no charming patina from Grandpa's day. It was modern, industrial, efficient, and absolutely unbreakable. I miss the old one, I'll admit it, but I didn't miss the anxiety. I didn't miss the threats, the trespassing, or waking up wondering what else Hilltop Manor might try to sneak over it while I slept. This one was mine too. But this time, I added a few upgrades. Steel bollards on either side, retractable only by remote. 2 new license plate reading cameras mounted 10 feet up and tied into cloud storage. A motion sensor that pinged my phone if anyone even stepped foot on it. And a big custom-made metal sign bolted to the center rail. Private property, no trespassing. Weight limit enforced by law. And underneath, in a bold serif font, see case number HMPAV, Morgan County Court of Madison. People talk. I'd seen them, residents from Hilltop Manor, slowly driving past the edge of my property line, peering at the new structure through their windows like they were approaching a war memorial. No one crossed. Not anymore. Not after what happened to Karen. She was long gone now. House sold at a loss. Last I heard, she'd moved in with a sister in Pensacola. Some folks say she's trying to start fresh. Others say she's under quiet investigation in another county for misuse of HOA funds. Me, I don't care. Let her fight someone else's bridge. Jason came by a week after the rebuild, said he wanted a follow-up photo. I obliged, stood next to the new sign, arms folded, wearing the same denim jacket I'd worn to court. He asked how it felt. Winning. I told him it didn't feel like winning. It felt like justice. It felt like being able to sit on my porch with a cup of black coffee and not have to look over my shoulder. It felt like finally being heard. He smiled and said that's what winning should feel like. I get letters now, emails too. Homeowners from all over the country telling me about their own Karens, about bridges and driveways and fences and bylaws twisted into weapons. They thank me for fighting back. Some even ask for advice. One guy wanted to name his dog Wade. I told him to name it Boundary instead. More symbolic. Truth is, I didn't set out to make a statement. I just wanted what was mine to be left alone. My land, my bridge, my rules. But when someone pushes hard enough, long enough, thinking they can wear you down, sometimes the only answer is to push back harder and make damn sure the next person doesn't forget it.